gas, and yet the Baloch people are the poorest in the country. It has been the site of a separatist struggle ever since Pakistan came into existence, yet it is barely covered in the domestic news media. Not for a lack of trying. For decades, Baloch journalists have risked their lives to report on topics such as corruption in local government, to the resource grab, to the Pakistani state's involvement in the kidnapping and killing of Baloch activists. A few reporters from the Pakistani mainstream media have tried to cover the region too. Some have paid with their lives, most face intimidation, and many have just quit and fled the area. The Listening Post's Meenakshi Ravi now on the resounding silence that surrounds Balochistan, the toughest place to do journalism in Pakistan.
It looks perfect. It sounds even better.
वाजा कैसी हवा मचाए शोर डोले डोले रूम रूम रे वो देखो आया है बादल झूम के.
For months, this song, Waja, or Friend, about the region of Balochistan has been playing incessantly on Pakistan's TV channels. Not just on entertainment outlets, it pops up in ad breaks on news channels too. There's something uncomfortable, surreal about watching a song about Pakistan's most impoverished, most militarized and most underreported region playing on a loop this way, being presented this way.
It's very consistent with Pakistan state's messaging, which is that Balochistan is a beautiful place. Its people are beautiful. They just sing and dance on the mountains, in the deserts, by the beach. Yes, there are some hints that there were some dark shadows, but they have been lifted. So it's quite central to how Pakistani states and maybe rest of Pakistan wants to see Balochistan, a beautiful land without its troublesome people.
Balochistan has always been a site of territorial anxiety for the Pakistani state. It borders Afghanistan, Iran, and the Indian Ocean. It's also been a site of mining, so gold, zinc, oil, copper, gas. It's a province that functions, because of its geostrategic position, as a route for the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and that has meant just millions and millions in investments from China, that the Pakistani state, especially the military, is really dedicated to protecting.
That protection of Balochistan's territory and numerous high-value, high-security projects has not extended to people in the region. For 70 years, Balochistan has been providing the rest of Pakistan with natural gas, meeting more than 50% of the country's needs at times. However, today, fewer than half the cities in Balochistan have access to that gas. Many Baloch use wood and coal for heating and cooking. Balochistan's separatist movement, born prior to Pakistan's creation in 1947, has seen wave after wave of violence, with the Pakistani military resorting to brutality to rein in the insurgency. There have been countless human rights abuses, enforced disappearances in the thousands of Baloch nationalists, activists, intellectuals and journalists.
Balochistan has been actually turned into an information black hole.
Kiyya Baloch used to be a reporter in Balochistan.
I was among the few journalists covering Islamic militancy, Baloch separatist movement, human rights abuses. I also covered China-Pakistan economic corridor, which was accompanied by mass enforced disappearances when nationalists opposed Chinese investment in Balochistan.
I have enormous amount of respect for Kiyya's work. Kiyya was reporting with a huge amount of attention to detail and evidence, which is why he eventually was subject to threats and had to flee.
The intelligence agencies started tapping my phone calls. Then they shared a list with me saying that you have been talking to these people. You cannot hide their details from us. They wanted my name to be placed in anti-terror watch list. Yeah, things became very difficult for me to work under strict surveillance. The easiest way for me to leave Pakistan was through a student visa. I received admission from a Norwegian journalism school. It was in 2017, and then I never went back to Pakistan.
Kiyya Baloch's story is not unique. The immense pressures from state authorities, military, intelligence and local government, combined with intimidation by insurgents and big corporations investing in Balochistan, meant that for years, doing journalism there was like embarking on a suicide mission. More recently, the number of journalist abductions and deaths has fallen. For media in the region, self-censorship is one method of self-preservation. The other has been for journalists to just leave. Even then, safety is not guaranteed.
I want to tell you about my colleague and friend, Sajid Hussain, who is a brilliant journalist out of Balochistan. And he got into trouble for reporting a fairly straightforward story that the intelligence agencies didn't like. And he was a wise man. He was not into taking unnecessary risks. So he left the country immediately. After sort of struggling for 10, 11 years, he was given asylum in Sweden. And a year later, he was found dead, drowned in a lake. The Swedish government told the family that it's a suicide.
But just hardly after 6 months, another activist from Balochistan, Kiyya Baloch, also disappeared in December 2020 from Toronto. Her body was discovered under the same circumstances as Sajid Hussain. She was also found dead inside a river. The police determined that it was a suicidal case. We don't know how they died, but it's very difficult to digest that someone who actually fled Balochistan, came in the West, was happy why he or she would commit suicide here. I have been very much concerned about my security here. Until recently, I was based in Oslo, but now I have moved to a very remote corner of Norway. I avoid meeting people. I avoid visiting big cities. So these things have been taking a very heavy toll on my mental health.
None of these stories from Balochistan, of journalists in exile fearing for their lives, of student activists going missing only for their mutilated bodies to be found later, of militants blowing up gas pipes, none of these feature in that song that's all over Pakistan's airwaves. Ironically, the music video, which the branding suggests, has been financed by a corporation with multiple big business interests and a possible eye on Baloch development projects. That video has been getting all this airtime just as Balochistan has seen a surge of disappearances. Families of the missing have been holding protests and vigils, and they get next to no coverage on the news.
The only thing that's considered relevant or significant when it comes to Balochistan tends to be its mega projects. But the people who live there are not seen as significant. If you are a reporter at a Pakistani media outlet and you bring a controversial story to the editorial desk, there's a very, very high chance that your editor will censor it or get visited by an intelligence officer who will tell him or her to censor it. Or it will be watered down significantly.
In other parts of Pakistan, there is actually very, very little interest about what's going on in Balochistan. It's considered practically like another country. It's getting a lot of airtime because it's a commercial product sponsored by sort of big corporation. On behalf of government, I suspect they do not want you to hear. Thousands of people have disappeared. Many of them are being kept in dungeons, tortured every day. So obviously, to drown out those sounds, you make these beautiful videos with catchy lyrics. And then you buy airtime and you can play them for as long as you want.
And finally, it has been almost a year since Tunisian President Kais Saied dismissed the country's prime minister and suspended parliament in what he called a national emergency measure, one that his critics have called a coup. Saied has recently gone further, firing 57 judges, accusing them of corruption and protecting terrorists, and he's ordered a referendum for the 25th of July to replace the country's constitution. That constitution only dates back to 2014. It was passed by Parliament and was a point of pride for many Tunisians, a symbol of post-Arab Spring democracy. Saied's new constitution would drop Islam as the state religion and give even more power to the president. So this referendum call has led to nationwide protests. We're leaving you now with some recommendations of where to go online, outlets and specialists serving up news at this critical time in Tunisia. For French and Arabic speakers, TUNIFACT is a unit created by the National Union of Tunisian Journalists, along with a Dutch NGO to debunk misinformation. Facebook is where they have most of their followers, but they're also active on Twitter and Instagram. For French speakers, Jeune Afrique is an outlet we've recommended before. It is focused on Francophone African countries and has analysis and reporting on Tunisia. Kashif Media reports in Arabic. It is prolific on YouTube and Instagram. On Twitter, we follow two academics, Mohamed Dia Hamami, a Tunisia specialist at Syracuse University, as well as Anne Wolf, a fellow at All Souls College at Oxford University. For French speakers, Hikal Ben Mahfoud, a director of the Tunisia University Mission in North America, is also worth a follow. And we'll be keeping an eye out for news on Tunisia too. We'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.